Well, welcome everybody. This is John Sarver, and I'm glad that you're able to join us this evening. I have to do just a few things before I turn it over to our guest tonight. And first thing I have to do is to thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, Sri Energy, and Sumter Solar. And also, if you're not a member of GLREA, we would love to have you join, which you can easily do online at www.glrea.org. And these, as most of you know, these are recorded. And so if you run into somebody who would like to learn more about vehicles to the grid, just direct them to our YouTube channel. All they have to do is do a search for GLREA, and they'll be able to track us down. We have over, I don't know how many, over 100 videos for sure, recordings there from the various sessions we've done since 2020. But tonight we have a very interesting topic. I know there's a lot of interest in using vehicle batteries for backup power for homes, and maybe for helping with reducing your utility costs. And of course, there's a lot of talk also about utilities being able to kind of maybe make use of vehicle batteries also. And so we're lucky tonight to have Zach Woogen, who's the executive director of the Vehicle Grid Integration Council, who's going to talk to us about the council and the work they're doing in this area related to vehicles to the grid and vehicles to the home. And so please mute yourself. We'll have time later for you to ask questions. And with that, let me turn it over to you, Zach. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, John. And apologies again that I'm on two separate boxes in your Zoom here. Video over here, we're waving, and audio probably in a separate box. But I appreciate you inviting the Vehicle Grid Integration Council and myself in to present today. As you mentioned, my name is Zach Woogen. I'm the Executive Director of VGIC. I've been with the group since we spun it up in 2019. And before that, I was working on utility scale solar and battery projects. So I come from the grid side of things as opposed to the transportation side of things. I'll start with a statement that I hope folks here agree with, but if folks don't, I also want to hear that, which is that EVs represent untapped potential beyond mobility as distributed energy resources to support a secure and affordable energy transition. This is something that unites our organization and our 42 member companies that I'll talk about in a moment. And it really drives our day-to-day work as well as our long-term strategy. What is our work? We are a 501c6 nonprofit trade association focused on growing the market for bidirectional charging, for managed charging, or what's sometimes called V1G, or smart charging, as well as what we call DER paired charging. So trying to alleviate barriers to these solutions and technologies and ensure that customers have access to the solutions and, most importantly, to their benefits. We are supported by several of the large auto manufacturers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis in your backyard, Honda, Nissan, Toyota, Tesla, Rivian, BMW, Mercedes. We're also supported by several charging station manufacturers, folks like ChargePoint, Emporia, Fermata Energy, and of course Tesla and some others. Also folks that develop EV charging sites. So fleet charging site developers like Mobility House and Grid Beyond, public fast charging sites, folks like Gravity and Tesla, of course, and several of the automakers. A lot of folks in our membership are also working to aggregate vehicles and chargers. So companies like Sunrun, Energy Hub, Weave Grid, they would identify as sort of virtual power plant providers, or ChargeScape is another example. There's a bunch of them. So we have a diverse sort of Big Ten of membership, but primarily representing those common commercial interests. You'll also see on the bottom row here we have what we call our associate members. These are utilities, but you may notice we don't have any large investor-owned utilities. I'll come back to that in a moment, but I think this group is probably familiar with some of the conflicts between utility business models, I should say traditional utility business models, and some of the grid edge customer owned solutions that I think a lot of our members are interested in seeing come to light. So we have municipal utilities and rural electric co-ops, and here in California we have CCAs, community choice aggregators as well. So that's a little bit more about who makes up our group. The way that we work through barriers is through our working groups. We have one focused on compensation, addressing utility rate design, program design for demand response or virtual power plant, right? These either traditional or newer concepts to tap into resources and provide services to the grid. We have a technical working group which focuses on interconnection requirements and processes, testing standards, communication protocols, some of the wonkier, more technical topics behind these solutions. And we have an infrastructure and planning working group that works to unlock funding for the equipment rebates, for make-ready infrastructure that might be on the utility side of the meter or on the customer side of the meter, and to make sure all of this is integrated into the utility planning. I personally lie awake at night thinking about all the effort we're putting into these programs and rates and rules, and we want to make sure they're reflected when the utility does their planning process, so we don't end up using power plants or building new power plants we don't actually need, but we're actually accounting for all this progress we're making at the edge of the grid. So that's how our members engage with our group. I know I'm not necessarily here to pitch membership to you all, but more so focused on what this means for you. So we're working across the country. We're trying to create kind of on the leading edge of things, trying to create opportunities for these technologies, and then following that up with consistency across these states, trying to make sure that rules are similar across the country and there's some common set of best practices. It's not always easy to make that happen. As you guys know, Michigan is Michigan, and Illinois is Illinois, and Texas and Jersey are Texas and Jersey. And so ultimately, we do need to meet folks where they're at. And that's why a lot of our time is spent on really hands-on engagement with regulators and staffers and utilities and different state agencies most of the time, trying to understand what they need out of these solutions and meet them where they're at. We're hoping to paint this map blue in the coming years and continue to expand, but here's where we're at presently. In addition to that detailed hands-on policy and regulatory engagement, we also publish sort of higher level thought leadership, trying to guide the conversation and ensure that all these stakeholders that are newer to these topics have consistent terminology and concepts and guidance as they develop new pilots or programs or rules. I'll also say, I alluded earlier to the investor-owned utilities. Oftentimes we see eye to eye, oftentimes we don't. We did in 2024 establish a new effort we call the Utility Collaboration Forum, which kind of recognizes that there are some utilities that seem to be genuinely excited about load flexibility from EVs and about bidirectional charging. It usually boils down to what issues those utilities are facing and frankly, what political pressure they're under to solve those problems. So we've been able to work with them a little bit more closely, not necessarily always in a litigated proceeding with lawyers and all the work that comes with that, but a little bit more upstream, trying to figure out what programs they could propose and how we can kind of develop them together. And so we're doing that again this year with the group on the slide here. You can see some of the big utilities. We're hoping to get DTE and consumers in next year. Fingers crossed. We're having some good early conversations, but it is a challenge to sell utilities on some of this stuff, and I'll talk about why in a moment. We do a bunch of other partnership stuff, like a lot of nonprofits and trade groups. We're doing some stuff on the global scale. The top left, that's actually International Energy Agency. They're working to scale interoperability of charging equipment in vehicles, making sure that for bidirectional charging, different chargers and vehicles can talk to one another. And in doing so, we can create more choice for customers rather than being locked into a single ecosystem. For example, buying a Ford charger and a Ford vehicle. We don't want that to be the only option for bidirectional charging. There should be the ability to have more of that interoperability between different types of equipment. We have local partners, Texas, in New England, and then a bunch of other sort of informal partnerships, and some other stuff we're working on. So that's just the like who we are, who I am. I'm glad we have that out of the way. But the important stuff is we're actually here to talk about the topic of today. What is vehicle grid integration? We use this term vehicle grid integration, or VGI, to encompass the full umbrella of concepts that allow EVs to provide more value, either to the grid or to customers. One of those sort of categories of use cases is what's called managed charging, sometimes called V1G or smart charging, kind of just shifting the charging load, making sure that you're charging off peak. We consider that to be low-hanging fruit. A lot of utilities have programs or rates that support this already. We're doing what we can to just scale it even further. On the right-hand side, we have all the way to the right, what we call DER paired charging. So there's a whole set of questions that come when you co-locate EV charging with rooftop solar or with a battery or with solar and a battery or a fuel cell or a generator, whatever the case may be. So for better or worse, we've been sort of tasked with figuring out what does that mean for your interconnection agreement with the utility? What does it mean for your rates and programs? If you have a net metering rate, for example, if you're on that with your rooftop solar system, what happens to that when you add a bidirectional charger? These are really important questions in practice because a lot of customers, and maybe a lot of folks on this call who have solar, are aware of this bidirectional charging opportunity, or what's sometimes called V to G or V to X. I'll also note that we cover something second from the right here called flexible service connection. This is a little bit more wonky, but usually for multi-charging sites, workplace, fleet depots, larger apartment buildings, and even public fast charging stations. Oftentimes, we're kind of running out of places on the grid to site these larger loads that have capacity. So we're needing to get creative and establish processes for the site developers to engage with the utilities and use some load management solutions, or maybe local DERs like solar generators to provide the capacity that's needed, or to provide a buffer so you can get a site connected and up and running faster rather than having to wait for 1 or 3 or 5 years for the utility to upgrade their system. All of that out of the way, what we're really here to talk about is bidirectional charging. And we break that down into two sort of basic configurations. On the left-hand side in the red box, you'll see grid isolated bidirectional charging. This is when you electrically isolate the grid, create an island to power your home or maybe building, and usually is done to provide backup power. On the right-hand side within that red box, we call it grid parallel bidirectional charging. So this could be putting in an interconnection request with the utility, just like you may have done for your rooftop solar system, and using your vehicle battery, maybe to optimize your bill. If you're in a time of use rate, you can charge your vehicle battery when power is inexpensive and then use the energy from that vehicle battery to provide the services your home needs and avoid having to purchase power from the utility in that evening time of use peak, or whenever the time of use peak may be. This grid parallel configuration could also be an option where you are actually selling power back to the utility and exporting past your meter. There could be a rate design, like a net metering rate, for example, where this is an option. It could be a program, like a demand response program, or like a virtual power plant is sort of the big buzzword these days, where you can sell power to the utility, or maybe some other off-taker. Maybe you can aggregate all these resources and integrate into the wholesale market. There's a lot of opportunity there. So we're going to focus on those two use cases. That's sort of the exciting, shiny new thing that we like to talk about often, and I think it's a lot of good questions. So, um, as an overview, there's a lot of real value here. In New England, for example, school buses right now are making about $10,000 per bus per year. In Massachusetts and in Vermont, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, um, the same program is available to light duty vehicles, but with lower powered chargers, right? Instead of a 60 kilowatt, you maybe have a 10 kilowatt or something like that. You're looking at like $3,000 a year. It's still very lucrative amount of money to make from selling power. Usually 30 to 60 events per year, or per summer specifically, and about 2 to 3 hours per event. Um, so very exciting opportunity. It works there in New England. There are like fundamental energy economics that underpin that opportunity. The utility is genuinely avoiding costs. Their regulator wants them to do that. And so, given the dynamics of the grid in that region, that value is real. It's not like a pilot or something that is sort of a subsidy. It's a real value to the grid. In California, we have a bunch of programs. One that I like to highlight offers customers $2 a kilowatt hour for any load reduction or for uh, doing bidirectional charging, so discharging from the vehicle battery, maybe even exporting to the grid. And that's actually guaranteed for 30 hours a year. So if you do the math out, 10 kilowatt charger, that's about $600. And I'm sorry, I've used the acronym here. I try not to, but LDV, that means light duty vehicle. Market size estimates. I always try to take these with a grain of salt. If you look at what the consultants are doing, there is a clear trend, which is that every year they're sort of upping their forecasts for how much bidirectional charging sort of market size there is and how much installed capacity there is. I will say that presently, I believe last I checked, we have about 40 gigawatts of batteries in vehicles on the road in America. Just gonna say that again, 40 gigawatts of batteries on the road. It's massive. That actually exceeds the total amount of stationary battery storage we have in this country, both behind the meter, Tesla Powerwalls, and other batteries, and in front of the meter, big, utility scale projects. So the technical potential is immense. Now, you'd want to derate that, right? Not everyone is plugged in all the time. Not everyone has spare power in their vehicle. Not everyone wants to do this, and that's fine. We don't need everyone to do it. We already have achieved such massive scale in sort of the total potential, maximum potential, and EVs will continue to be sold year in and year out for the next 5, 10, 15 years, and so on. So I'm really energized by just the sheer scale of the opportunity here. Even if like 1% of people are interested in doing this, that is the ability to turn off some peaking gas power plants or early retire some coal plants. So it's really a tremendous environmental impact and in turn a massive cost impact because with all of these batteries out there, customers have already purchased the battery, right? So although there might be some incremental costs, which we'll talk about, of the charging system, and you would want to, of course, compensate customers for the service they're providing to the grid. From a systems perspective, you're tapping into all these batteries that are just latent, sort of locked away capacity right now, rather than having to invest in a lot of new batteries or gas generation or other large utility scale resources. So it provides this exciting potential, not just to avoid emissions on the grid, in addition to the emissions avoided in the transportation sector, but also to avoid cost and reduce the need for those generation facilities on the grid, as well as transmission and distribution and other services to balance supply and demand. Okay, so key takeaway here. The market is evolving quickly. There's real opportunity. It's no longer just a science project. It has been for maybe decades, but now things are getting pretty real. We look at this problem and we see a lot of complexity, a lot of overlapping issues. We've been trying to break it down into some distinct swim lanes to just talk about it in a more effective way and to try to make policy progress in a way that's more efficient. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we talk about interconnection, which is answering the question, will my utility allow me to connect to their system using this bidirectional charging equipment. This is something familiar to this group. You also need to go through an interconnection process when you install rooftop solar systems. The second pillar here is compensation mechanisms, which answers the question, what am I going to save or earn by using my vehicle battery in this configuration? Is there a rate or a program available to me to sell power to the utility? Is there a rate where I can optimize around the times of use and different times of day to lower my bill? The third pillar answers the question, is there any incentive or equipment rebate or other upfront cost support, maybe tax credit, anything available to me to help offset the upfront cost of the charging equipment and associated installation and charging costs? That is critical right now. The market is still relatively nascent, and the equipment is more expensive than we expect it to be in coming years. So we'll see economies of scale and some competition, scaled manufacturing facilities, and some technology developments that I'll talk about in a little bit that might lower the cost of the equipment and the installation. But for now, it's a lot for most customers, and we want to see if there's opportunities to offset that, given that we want this to be a part of the energy toolkit in the next 5, 10, 15 years. We need to make these investments today, get the equipment out there so it's available when we want it. Technical standards, this is really more industry focused than consumer focused, but we do need additional clarity and alignment on the safety, communications, and interoperability protocols and standards required. What do the utilities need? What do automakers need? What do charging companies need? And so on, in order to make sure devices can talk to one another, they're reliable, and they're safe, and some other issues that we want on that technical side. So we try to break these things down. They're so complicated. Let me dive maybe a little bit more into a few of these pillars and explain what's happening right now on the ground. You may have noticed so far I've not really used those terms or acronyms, vehicle to grid or V2G, or vehicle to home, V2H, vehicle to building, V2B. In our experience since 2019 in this group, and before that, working with other folks in the industry, um, you can really lose people in these acronyms. Engineers, utility program people, policymakers, marketing folks, they all have different, I think, conceptions of those acronyms and what they entail. We try to talk more directly about what the system is doing. So to break this down a little bit further, on the left-hand side, you'll see uh, configurations that require service connection to the utility or energization, but not necessarily needing to move through a lengthy interconnection process or study for impacts on the grid. So in the top left-hand side, you'll see installing equipment in load-only mode. This might be really important for a school district, for example. You have maybe 3 months to get in there, get your vehicle, get your charger, get everything installed up and running so you can get kids to school. You may not have time to move through DTE's interconnection process, right? So ensuring you can deploy the equipment in that load only mode first, and then later enable bidirectional mode, and only do so after you've moved through the appropriate process and gotten the appropriate approvals. That's key. This could also be important for folks on this call and others who want to sort of future proof and purchase the equipment now when they purchase their vehicle and charger, and at a later date turn on or enable that bidirectional mode so that you can take part in some rate and program that maybe DTE or consumers does not yet offer. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see this islanded use case. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but most utilities in the country have very well-established processes for installing a home backup generator or a home backup battery. Oftentimes, you need to let the utility know what you've installed, but you don't necessarily need to move through that interconnection process and the cost and forms and delay that come with that. The utilities just want to know where it is so that when there's an outage, and I know it's Michigan, so I'm saying when, not if, they're able to ensure their line workers stay safe and aren't accidentally working with live wires. On the top right-hand side and the right-hand side in general, that's that interconnection use case. You are actually, just like you are with your rooftop solar, working with DTE or consumers to interconnect your system to the grid. On the top right-hand side, we call that parallel non-export. where you might be discharging from the vehicle battery, but not exceeding your site load or your home needs. That might be really exciting to optimize your time of use rate, right? We saw recently Ford release announcement for their new home energy management product. I don't think that's quite the right name, but it's something like that, which is specifically designed to do this. It's using your vehicle battery to optimize around your time of use rate and not necessarily export if your utility doesn't have a rate that they want to pay you or a program that you can enroll in. Um, Most of the other home systems at the moment, GM, they have 9 vehicles that have this home backup power system. Tesla has a home backup power system with their Cybertruck. Those are really relegated to that bottom left, that islanded backup power. We're just now starting to see this top right parallel non-export use case. In the bottom right, you'll see parallel export. This is that full sort of futuristic dream of selling power to the utility. There's a rate, there's a program. As I understand it, DTE and consumers do not have a rate or program where you could do this with your vehicle battery. So that's something we are working with local partners. Our hope is moving forward, we can work with the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association on this as well, and try to ensure that consumers and DTE and others can establish the right programs and rates. So this is pretty wonky, but the takeaway here is, first and foremost, we try to talk about what it is we're talking about, not the acronyms, because you really lose people in the acronyms. Um, Sometimes V to H, people think that's just backup power, that's vehicle to home, right? Sometimes people think that's just backup power. Sometimes people think that's this top right use case, like home optimization. V to G, sometimes people think this whole thing is V to G. In fact, I did title the presentation, What's Up with V to G? But really, we just talk about the specific use case. It ends up saving time at the end of the day, trust me. All right. The next few slides are really in the weeds. I'm just going to not dive into this. So just a key takeaway here. We are making progress in clarifying interconnection rules for these new types of systems. It is frustrating but understandable that utilities and utility regulators see these as new types of systems. They're in fact very similar to stationary energy storage, and in some cases use the very same inverter models. So we're working on sort of a massive educational campaign with utilities and their regulators around the country to inform them about how these systems work. They are tasked with maintaining safety, and they will always be very conservative. So it is a long process to move through, but I'm happy to report that we are seeing some success providing that clarity, specifically around that sort of these use cases I mentioned in this last slide. And we have more states coming up, Nevada, Texas, the dominoes will continue to fall. And again, we're ultimately going to try to create this consistent treatment across all the states, make it really easy and clear for customers everywhere to understand the solutions and how they work and what's needed of them. I will say Michigan, you'll see at the middle of the bottom half of the slide here, Ford did petition the Public Service Commission for a declaratory ruling that determines that their system, when deployed such that it's used in bidirectional mode only when it's electrically isolated from the grid or in island mode, it will not need to go through that interconnection process. So again, consistent with this guidance, we issued this back in 2022 after meeting with members and utilities and a bunch of other folks. So Michigan was the first state to like formally adopt that guidance. They did it for Ford, and I've spoken with Commissioner Paratic and former Commissioner Carrion, both sort of demonstrating that the purpose of that was not just to provide treatment to Ford, but to create a very clear regulatory signal to the market so other automakers understand that that is how the utilities are meant to treat those systems in Michigan, and to send that same signal out to other utilities. Notably, Commissioner Paratic is an active member of the NAVRU EV working group. So she's a proponent and helps to spread the word on what's happening there in Michigan. A lot of text on this slide too. Again, the takeaway is there's real opportunity to make real money around the country. Some of this is underpinned by the actual economics of the grid at that point. Some of this is more pilot kind of market transition support, saying, look, we're okay overpaying these resources right now because we know in 5, 10, 15 years, we want them to be a part of our energy portfolio and our resource planning. So it's exciting to see more opportunities come up. The most recent one, which hasn't made it on this slide, but you all may have heard about the large energy package that recently was passed in Illinois. It's a 1,000-page piece of legislation, so we're still sifting through it. But there's a few really exciting items in there. One is that the utilities must establish virtual power plant programs, which is a growing trend. We're seeing that in Colorado and Maryland and more states and Virginia and other states to come. I know that there are advocates in Michigan pushing for that as well. So we're hoping to see more laws forcing that VPP creation in other states around the country, including Michigan. Um, the other interesting piece of compensation is there you have your rates and you have your programs, and these designs are very different. The programs tend to be more event based. Hey, let us tap into your vehicle battery for 30 hours a year or 30 events a year, 2 to 3 hours per event, right? It's we're going to tap in a few hours, a few opportunities throughout the year that are really critical peak events where we need every drop we can get at the edge of the grid. And in exchange, we'll pay you per kilowatt, right? Every year, every summer, every month. That's one structure, that sort of event-based dispatch. Um, Less frequent cycling of the battery. It is maybe easier for a lot of customers to understand as well, and familiar concepts. Um, on the rate side, you might see things that are more of a daily opportunity, right? You can have this with net metering policies where you're getting paid every day for selling power to the utility. There are some more innovative, sort of forward-looking ideas around dynamic pricing, creating this sort of distribution market that looks more like the wholesale market with sort of real time or close to real time optimization around prices that reflect the conditions on the grid and the costs of the grid. And so we're seeing some experimentation with that around the country. There are some other niche things. There are environmental sort of attributes. There are potentially wholesale market opportunities coming up where customers can aggregate and participate directly. But the takeaway, again, there's progress being made. We're going to keep driving to get more states and more utilities on board and expand what's already out there. And then this was that pillar focused on like upfront cost support. Um, Again, some case studies here. I realize a lot of this is not in Michigan, so I understand that, but bear with me. The goal here is just to demonstrate that this can also look a lot of different ways. So you can have a program that aims to install 100 free bidirectional chargers. You can have a program that's use case specific to school buses. You can have a program that has strings attached where you have to enroll in a program or a rate to use the vehicle battery if you're going to take these upfront incentives for the charging equipment. One thing I do want to note, and I think there was a question in the chat before I even got on around federal tax credits. A lot of people aren't aware, but the Section 30C tax credit, that's the tax credit for charging equipment, 30% off, 30% credit for charging equipment. And installation up to a certain point, that is still available through June 2026. So I think a lot of folks think that that's sunsetted. It did not. That is still available. I know that the Michigan utilities are also gearing up for their next transportation electrification programs. That is the type of venue where we will typically weigh in and recommend that there be an incremental incentive for make ready or for equipment rebates for bidirectional charging systems. Okay, I'm almost done. This is probably most relevant to you all, so thanks for bearing with me. But I get this question, usually it's the first question in the Q&A. I haven't looked at the Q&A box yet because I've been so busy yapping away. But the question is, what is available to the market right now? What can you buy? Nissan owners, Nissan Leaf owners, they can use their Nissan Leaf, especially in a residential setting with a company called Decibel. So that's the Decibel Aura. That is being sold in select markets. I don't know if it's being sold in Michigan. It costs about $10,000. It is a very sophisticated setup. It has an inverter, has a lot of smart software and hardware. It can also integrate with your rooftop solar, with your battery. The concept is to have everything DC integrated or DC coupled rather into a single inverter. So Decibel Aura, Decibel calls this their home energy station. It's more than just a charging station. You could have several, you can have two charging ports, your solar, your battery, and all of your home energy use optimized through this single home energy station. Um, Next up, we've got Ford's Lightning electric pickup truck with their Charge Station Pro and their additional equipment that's needed for that. Um, that is mostly marketed and sold for home backup power usage. However, there are some pilots and programs where it is starting to be used in that grid parallel mode. And as I mentioned a moment ago, Ford did announce, I think just last week or the week before, this new home energy management product that uses the vehicle battery even to support customer billing optimization and time of use rate optimization. I don't know yet if that is available in Michigan, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I think DTE was mentioned in their press release, but I would encourage folks to go and read that. If you Google Ford home energy management or Ford bidirectional charging DTE press release or something like that, it should come up. GM, they have a lot of vehicles. In fact, nearly their entire electric vehicle lineup across Chevy, Cadillac, and GMC is capable of bidirectional charging. Right now, that is only still focused on home backup power. So it has that transfer switch or the isolation technology that allows you to isolate from the grid and support your home during an outage. Kia has an EV9 that works with the Wallbox Quasar 2. It's a little bit more affordable than these other solutions, coming in at $6,440. And this one actually can't be deployed for backup only. Every instance where it will be deployed, it will also be in that grid parallel mode. So it's starting out in pretty limited markets in regions where you can get that interconnection or there is a rate or program to participate in. So again, I don't know if that's available in Michigan right now. I know some folks personally who have installed these, but this one's quite exciting as well because it's a little different from GM using a GM charger or Ford using a Ford charger or Tesla using a Tesla charger in that the charger and vehicle talk to one another through a relatively standardized communication platform. So that handshake that needs to happen between the vehicle and the charging equipment is a little bit more, we'll call it open source for Kia and Wallbox than all these other examples. That's really exciting, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Lastly on this list is Tesla with the Cybertruck. Tesla has made public statements, albeit in sort of wonkier policy form, about expanding this capability very soon beyond their Cybertruck into their Model 3, Y, S, and X, their other models. One thing that is unique about Tesla's approach is they are pursuing what's called an AC bidirectional charging configuration where the power conversion, the battery runs on DC power, the grid is on AC, that conversion needs to happen somewhere, and Tesla has chosen to put that conversion on board the vehicle. All these other configurations have that coming off the vehicle in a DC power. So that power conversion happens either in the charging station or a separate wall box, like right next to the charging station. So by doing that approach of having the power conversion on board the vehicle, it's brought their cost down quite considerably. So anyone else kind of following in their footsteps doing the AC pathway, and we know, for example, Rivian has already committed to doing an AC bidirectional charging architecture. I would not be surprised if we saw other manufacturers follow suit. We've seen Stellantis, for example, demonstrate that AC bidirectional charging configuration recently, actually 2 weeks ago in Michigan. I was out in Ypsilanti and they were showing that off. So this AC approach can be much lower cost. The flip side is that some of the standards and utility interconnection pathways are a little bit less developed, which means that those AC configurations, while for now they're less expensive, they may be relegated to that backup power only use case for a little while longer than the DC examples. Okay. Promise, almost done. But the takeaway here is there is equipment. A lot of this is new in the last 12 and 18 months, which is very exciting. I would like to think about where we'll be in the next 12 to 18 months. I don't think this will all fit on one slide. And we'll see, again, we've seen public product announcements from all the folks at the bottom of the slide here. Volvo, Hyundai, Rivian, Honda, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, all these other companies, the vehicle side, as well as the charging side, ChargePoint, Emporia, other companies. Okay, almost done, I promise. Oh, I don't know how to get rid of all those messy notations. Uh, these are medium and heavy duty vehicles. They're mostly school buses. We don't need to spend much time on this, except I'll point out, or I'll ask the group actually, does anyone notice anything different about this table compared to the last table? Don't be shy, feel free to shout it out. All right, I'll
Yeah.
spoil it. Oh,
Oh,
go ahead.
yeah, the batteries are a hell of a lot bigger.
The batteries are oftentimes bigger. That's true. We do see pretty big batteries these days on some of the other vehicles, especially the pickup trucks and the larger three-seat SUVs. So, like, I think the Chevy Silverado EV has like a 200 kilowatt hour battery. Ford, I think the Lightning's 100 kilowatt hour. The Kia EV9 is quite high. But that is a good point. Some of these are massive batteries. So there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, 315 kilowatt hour, that's huge. At the grid edge, I mean, that's a lot of capacity. All right, not solid state batteries. The answer is that I didn't have to match up a vehicle with a charger for this table. On the medium and heavy duty side, they have made a lot more progress on this topic of interoperability, allowing that handshake between vehicles and chargers to work regardless of which equipment you're using. So it's not perfect yet, but it's a lot further along than it is for the light duty side. This again gives me hope. This did not look like this 12, 18 months ago. This is pretty recent that we have this interoperability. And so I'm really excited that we'll get to this point on the light duty side in the coming years, and that'll really help with customer choice. I don't think folks want to be locked into having a GM charger and vehicle. They want to be able to lease one vehicle and then go get another, or buy a charger and then use another. You know, you want that flexibility. And that also drives competition, drives down cost, and drives up the quality of the solutions. Okay, that was a lot of me talking. Thanks for bearing in there, or bearing with me, hanging in there. I know there's a lot of questions. I'm excited to get to them. I also have my email on the slide here. Encourage folks to reach out. John, I'll send over the deck so you can send it out to folks. There's a ton of appendix slides that dive a little bit more into the utility business model and how this sort of threads an interesting needle. It's not quite as much of a threat as rooftop solar might be, but it's also not quite as much of an exciting opportunity as building a bunch of charging stations is. So it's always interesting for us to think about what can we learn. I come from the solar world. What can we learn from solar? What can we learn from the more baseline EV issues and charging issues, and sort of leverage that. So with that, happy to take questions. Maybe I'll start in the chat with what I maybe can do.
Why don't you
Um,
stop the screen
mhm.
sharing? It'll be
Oh,
easier for
yes.
us to see people.
Great idea.
Yeah, why don't you start with the chat? Good idea.
Sure. Yes. So there's questions about Ionic 6 and Hyundai. I actually drive a Hyundai Ionic. I love it. It's an amazing car. There are a lot of ways to pull power off a vehicle. Unfortunately, some of those might not be covered under warranty. So that is a really key constraint. For better or worse, automakers have a significant role here to play in enabling these solutions. And our hope is some of that interoperability might help in the future. But right now, some of these other ways to pull power off a vehicle aren't, I'd say, approved. They're sort of at your own risk. You might void your vehicle warranty. Not something I would recommend personally. There's some other stuff, John Richter, around the Ford. I think I covered that earlier in the deck, but to recap, yes, Ford was issued this specific ruling that says that its system is for backup power and therefore doesn't need to go through the interconnection process with the utilities. And we are starting to see it's a challenging dance, right? We want to make sure that people that want to use this only for backup power don't need to go through this complex process. At the same time, we do want opportunities for customers to use the very same equipment in a different mode. That's the key thing, is Ford can turn on that sort of grid parallel mode. But that's not the sort of default setting. The default setting is for backup power only. So it's a dance we make, and are trying to make sure that utilities feel comfortable, because they have a lot of power here to say no, right? They have to maintain the safety of their grid and their line workers. Okay, so it's very early in the market, right? A lot of vehicles that I think will be able to do this moving forward, but not yet. The question was, how will utility ever know electrons are electrons? Just don't feed them. The grid is down, and don't feed more than your typical usage would have been before you went solar. Yeah, that's certainly one of the ways that we're thinking about that uh, non-exporting grid parallel configuration, where the theory of it butts up against reality is in the product availability. So again, Ford, GM, Tesla, Kia, Nissan, and others to come like Rivian, they ultimately they have the app that they're giving you, their vehicle. You have the data agreement with them in terms of conditions. They're sort of a key player here, for better or worse, that are going to offer that solution. There may not be a button to press where you can just use your vehicle battery to meet your home load and not make sure that you're feeding, and make sure you're not feeding more than your typical usage before you went solar. You probably need that Ford app or the Rivian app or whatever system there is in place. So it kind of butts up against this product design stuff. And the more you all ask your automakers to provide this stuff, the more they will invest in it. I assure you, that's part of the reason I'm presenting here. That's part of the reason I do a lot of the education, is we need demand from customers. We want people to want this so that they can ask their utilities, hey, where's the rate that lets me do this? Where is the rule? They want to ask their lawmakers and their policymakers, why aren't we tapping into this? This is exciting. And we want them to ask their dealers and their, don't worry about the dealers actually, but you want to ask Ford or GM or whoever, why aren't you guys doing more of this? Those are the types of questions personally I want to ask to folks. Parallel non-export should not require interconnection, from Dale. Yes, we've worked through in some states a tiered process where if you're doing parallel non-export, especially if you're under a certain kilowatt value or kVA and you're a smaller system, you should be able to move through a much more streamlined process, like somewhere between just notifying them and moving through like full study, right? Things like virtual inspection, take a picture of your panel and your equipment. Things like notification only that says, you've already seen a million of these systems, just give me a drop down menu, I'll verify that I have this. The problem is there often are bad actors, and utilities, again, that I don't need to tell you guys, I'm sure you hear all the time about interconnection barriers from utilities. They're in charge of safety and they take that stuff super seriously. Let's see. Alexis, I love solar with GTE interconnection. I want to use my Hyundai Ioniq 6 to peak shave. Is that C or D? Yeah, at this stage, Hyundai or Enphase does not yet have a product that lets you do that, unfortunately. But that would be C. Adding on the solar is not accounted for in those four use cases I showed. We are currently working on updated guidance that does address solar for all those configurations, because again, in surveys, we found that a lot of the customers that are at least even aware of bidirectional charging, and a lot of those adopting it do have solar. So that overlap is critical. So we want to provide more guidance there. And Alexis, to your point about not understanding, I don't think anyone understands what happens when you add this to solar. We're starting to work out that challenge in a few states already. The fear is, if I use a bidirectional charging system, will I get kicked off my net metering arrangement? There's a lot of regions around the country that have these legacy net metering tariffs where customers got a great deal 5 or 10 years ago. If they get kicked off, they're worried about losing that deal because the current regimes are not as compelling. So we're working hard to figure that out. There are a lot of potential solutions. You can hang a meter on everything and parse out the electrons. You could acknowledge, hey, an electron is an electron. It should be valued whatever a kilowatt hour is valued at that point of the grid, at that place in time. There should be no such thing as like a green subsidy because it's from solar. There's arguments for and against that, right? That's something to consider more. You can also use control systems so that when you discharge from the vehicle battery, you're making sure you're never exporting to the grid more than what your rooftop solar generates. That way, you're never able to be like a structural winner and make out way better because you added V2G to your solar. You're really just meeting your own needs. So there's a lot of solutions, some better for customers, some better for the utility. So we're trying to work through all that. And frankly, it's been a challenge, but we're working on it. Yeah, energy monitor. So John, to your point, yeah, there's a lot of solutions, energy management systems, power control systems. There's UL certified power control systems that can support this. You can hang a current transformer or CT clip or coil on things, meters everywhere. There's a lot of ways to do it. Dale said Ford and GM systems both use Delta inverters. These are essentially interoperable. They use the same equipment. Yeah, a lot of this just comes down to the communications protocol. So the handshake that needs to happen when you try to pull power from a vehicle, you drop a voltage on one end of a cable, power starts to flow. The vehicle goes, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't want this to happen. I'm going to electrocute something or set it on fire. That's why you need that communications protocols, that handshake between charger and vehicle that says, we are doing this intentionally. The software is working correctly. This is safe and it's interconnected to the grid. We're not, or it's the home has its own grid. We're not electrocuting anyone. We're not causing problems. So that's one of the challenges that makes things a little bit more complicated. How badly do the battery round trip losses affect these types of system? Yeah, round trip efficiency is not good. I'll say very, very directly. These batteries are not optimized. Batteries are very complicated. That's not a cop out. They really are. The current vehicle batteries are optimized for driving. They're not optimized for this round trip efficiency. So there's a lot of losses in the power conversion to and from the battery. We might see one day the improvements there. We probably will, but not yet. Exporting solar, thanks, John. Exporting solar to Utilities Michigan is a bad deal. Yeah, I mean, in that case, that home sort of optimization is probably a great opportunity. Would love to see a better deal for exports in Michigan. It's politically contentious. There's a lot of baggage around those issues, been litigated for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But right now you might be better off using your vehicle and your charger to optimize around your solar and your home energy use and not worry about exporting to the grid. Question from Lee about base power. I don't know what base power is doing on V2G. My very cursory understanding is base power is mostly focused on home stationary batteries. It'd be great if they did something on V2G. They have a ton of money. It's nice when your founders are linked up with all the billionaires. So I would love to start a startup like that. Yeah, I hope they lean into V2G and start investing. Okay. Sorry, I know we're running out of time. I took a lot up with my presentation. So question, let's see. DTE and WeaveGrid have a program to control your charger. Yeah, there's a lot of these sort of lower hanging fruit managed charging programs that are just focused on shifting load, doing sort of overnight savings or peak time savings. But yeah, the optimization within the home and with the solar is sort of outside of the wheelhouse of a lot of those first generation programs. Let's see, imported charger. Okay, cool. I hope I got everything in the chat. Anything I missed in the chat or any questions that folks have, I can stay on an extra few minutes to chat and answer more questions if that's helpful.
Yeah, why don't you raise your virtual hand if you have an additional question?
Where are you based out of?
I live in San Francisco,
So
and the team.
do you have a presence, staff presence in Michigan, or they just work nationally?
Yeah, our team's all remote around the country. And what we try to do, especially in a place like Michigan and Illinois and Texas and other states that we're a little bit newer to, is we try not to come in swinging with all our crazy California ideas. Like we want to partner with John or the Johns here. We want to partner with, we have in the past partnered with the Michigan Energy Innovation Business Council. We've been trying to speak to local stakeholders so that we are able to match our subject matter expertise and the sort of broader technology context we've picked up in other states and markets with the local politics and background. But we don't have a local presence ourselves in Michigan.
Hey, John Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was curious when you were showing compensation for making your grid, your batteries available to the utility. Most of them were in dollars per kilowatt year, which sort of presupposes, I mean, I could see that with a stationary battery, but with a vehicle, it sort of presupposes that your car's always available to them when they want it, which at peak on a summer day might not be true because your car's at work. I'm just curious how that works. I was expecting a, dollars per kilowatt hour when they tapped it kind of thing, rather than, a power rating.
Yeah, definitely. I'll say that. Oh, whoops. Double mic'd. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. First off, the dollar per kilowatt year, I just standardized things. None of those are actually dollar per kilowatt year. They're dollar per kilowatt. So the first one is dollar per kilowatt summer. That's the top left. And then the California program next to it, $110. That's actually a different dollar per kilowatt month throughout the summer. I just added them up. And then the next program in California, that's $60. That's actually $2 a kilowatt hour for a guaranteed 30 hours a year. But that aside, to your point, the event-based programs, the ones in New England, California, the ones that are launching soon in Colorado and Maryland, Virginia, and other regions, those are like voluntary programs. You are not a capacity resource that is penalized if you don't show up. Instead, you're sort of a voluntary DR resource that says, I'm going to try to show up this summer. If I show up for the 30 or 60 events you want for 2 or 3 hours, I'll be paid for that performance. Some of these programs have sort of a D rating. That's like if you show up 80% of the time, you get one payment. If you show up 100% of the time, you get another payment. The Colorado program is a great example of that. If you show up under 70% of the time, it really drops. It's a steep cliff if you don't show up for all those hours. So there's some different nuance to all of these programs and how they're designed. But ultimately, we're not yet at the stage where utilities and wholesale markets are so reliant on this as an actual planning resource, as a supply side resource. This is more about demand side management and reduction on an event basis. And then all these other rates are dollar per kilowatt hour. So the dynamic rates and the New York tariff, those are all the more of what you'd expect energy payments.
Go ahead, Alexis. He dropped his hand.
I'll ask. I guess understanding that because electrons are like water, they just flow. It's a little tough for me, but and I'm an engineer, but a civil engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer, and but in terms of like my ionic, I think you said that there is no system I currently can use, right? And get DTE's approval for, right? To peak shave, or my answer question that everybody knows the answer to.
Yeah, if you mean peak shave from a bidirect, like pull power from the vehicle battery
Yeah,
and peak shave.
I want to use the
Yeah,
power I generate. I don't
mhm,
want them to like cut a percentage off.
yeah. So currently, none of the Hyundai models allow you to do bidirectional charging, except for if you want to do tailgating or camping. Like I use it all the time with my induction cooktop when I go camping, for example. But there's like a
So
special adapter and support.
can
But if
I?
you just plug in your home charger with Hyundai, there's not a Hyundai approved piece of equipment yet. I do think they'll probably use that wall box charger because Hyundai and Kia, as y'all may know, are the same parent company back in Korea, and Kia did that EV9. I would be surprised if they don't expand into Hyundai with that same solution. So hopefully 12, 18 months, 24 months, we'll get there. It's just, I'm also frustrated at how slowly it's moving.
Right. I thought, well, there's a fitting I could plug into my Hyundai and charge things, right? I can power things. If I connected it to my panel box and shut off the solar and shut off the main breaker, of course, that's not what I'm supposed to do, but I could use it that way. And then I have to run all the wires to all my equipment in my house. I can't exceed the power, the output of my car. But anyways, it's complicated and I don't want to go that route, but it's sort of possible, right?
It is
Uh,
possible. There are several people on the on YouTube that show exactly how to do it.
Oh, okay.
If you go to YouTube and search on the Ionic guy powering your home with your Ionic 5, he goes through it in detail. But it's manual, right? It's
Right.
not the cool automated bidirectional stuff that Zach's talking about, right? You got to go down and throw off your main breaker, black out your house, switch from your charger to your vehicle to load adapter, plug
Right.
that into a generator port, and then yes, you absolutely can do it.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure at least I was understanding at some level.
yeah, I can't really recommend that approach. It's not the intended use, and I won't attest to the safety or reliability of that system
Yeah.
or the legality of it. You also have to contend with the National Electrical Code, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure if all of that meets NEC. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wash my hands of this,
There's a lot
but
of pieces.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of people on YouTube doing a lot of cool
Okay,
stuff, I guess. Yeah,
Thank you.
real
yeah,
quick.
John.
You mentioned virtual power plants and the Illinois
Mhm.
law that just recently got enacted. Do you have any idea why Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill in California that would establish a virtual power plant?
Yeah, I do. Oftentimes, well, okay, there's a few answers to this. One is that Gavin Newsom wants to run for president in 2028, and he's trying to appear as more of a moderate and not do things that might be pegged as driving up costs for people or doing anything that's too eco or green or whatever. There's also the reality that a lot of state agencies in California are doing a lot of work to establish virtual power plants already. And there was maybe a sense within the governor's office and maybe some other agencies that newer things would just get in the way of what's already being done. California actually has a virtual power plant program. The issue is that it doesn't have enough funding to last much longer. So we'll see what happens in the governor's January budget. Maybe there'll be more funding. I hope there'll be more funding. We'll see what happens in future years of the cap and trade program we have in California. Maybe there'll be more funding for that VPP program. But California has an interesting challenge. It has a lot of different rates and programs, and they overlap and they compete. And frankly, it's probably not very efficient for ratepayers or taxpayers. So there is an argument to say, let's focus in on a few real opportunities that are already well established. It's very different than Virginia or Maryland or Colorado, which really hasn't had much to date, having a bill, or Illinois saying we need to do a virtual power plant.
Thank you.
Yeah, go
And
ahead, Dale.
So what is the program that you're talking about in California? Is that something like Ohm Connect or something else?
yeah, there's a few different options. So
Yeah.
California has something called the Demand Side Grid Support Program, which has a subcategory for batteries that says we will pay batteries. Again, I'll generalize it to $110 a kilowatt summer or kilowatt year. Um, in exchange, that battery needs to be dispatched it's actually an interesting approach that differs from anything else I've ever seen. Instead of having a central dispatch, like a company that aggregates or a utility that dispatches during an emergency, it actually just asks the battery operator or the aggregator to watch the wholesale market price. And when the CAISO, the California Independent System Operator wholesale market price reaches a certain threshold, those batteries are to be dispatched by whoever's watching and coordinating the battery. And then you submit your data to the state agency, and then they give you your payment, your reward for doing that. So it's innovative. Yeah.
If your outflow matched up with when the prices were the highest, then they pay you for it.
Exactly. So you're submitting data on showing that you did perform during those times.
So that type of system is similar to the rates that Consumers has one and DTE has one, where they'll pay you extra for outflow if you do it during those time periods, or they'll charge you more for any inflow during that time, like something onerous like $1 a kilowatt hour. However, and I would sign up for that with solar and having batteries, and I would outflow during those times. However, they pair that with an onerous peak and off peak rate that's underneath it, so that I get no savings for using any power off peak, which is when I only pull power in during off peak. And I only outflow during on peak, because that's when the sun is out and that's when the rate is highest. But if I switch to one of these other rates, I would be losing in a number of different ways. It's too long to explain, because I heat my house with electricity over the winter with heat pumps, which I mostly, booked the credit the other 3 seasons with, I kind of get like 2.5 to 1 kilowatt hours, whatever I send out on peak in the summer and 3 seasons, I can get back 2.5 to 3 times that number of kilowatt hours in the wintertime, as long as I do it off peak. So my point here is the utilities and the regulators, if they want to do something, they just need to have a rate that would make sense. And then even somebody like myself would take advantage of it, let alone all the companies that are out there trying to put batteries out and do stuff. So I have no sympathy for why it's moving so slow, because the utilities are just blocking everything, and the regulators are just kind of going along with it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound trite, but I think what we need is actual bold policy leadership. Unfortunately, you need a regulator, or you need a legislature that's going to really push the utilities into the future, or drag them kicking and screaming into the future. Barring that, we'll all keep doing our best as advocates ourselves, and Great Lakes REA and other advocates in this space. But ultimately, you need those policy leaders to be bold. So I don't know what sort of work you all do, not just in the actual proceedings, but sort of run kind of like grooming and running candidates for those commission seats. I think that's probably a governor's office type of engagement, and then a lot of it's long run. But if we got some bold and savvy commissioners around the country, and I'll be honest, I really thought the slate of Michigan commissioners the past few years was going to be that. So watching from afar, I was disappointed to not see more, given their expertise and their experience on these EV topics and on grid edge topics. I maybe expected better. So we need
We
better
did too,
commissioners.
Zach. We did too.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
Well, that's probably a good place to end. Yeah, this has been a very interesting discussion. Zach, thank you very much for joining us. And we kind of look, GLREA and our members look forward to working with you in the future, because obviously there's going to be a future related to these issues. It's just a matter of how quickly we can kind of put the policies and technology in place and all the other things that you guys are working on. So I really appreciate you joining us, and we look forward again to working with you in the future. And thanks to everybody who's attended. Next week at this time, we're going to have a member meeting, and John Freeman will be sending out a notice to you. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.